Welcome to the Voter Education Coalition and WOW 6 Lawrence City Commission Primary Election Forum. I'm 6 News anchor Stephanie Bryan and your moderator for this evening. The Voter Education Coalition is a nonpartisan organization that sponsors candidate forums, meet and greets, and other events to educate citizens about candidates and their policies. You can learn more about the VEC and the events by visiting the Facebook page at facebook.com/VECDGKS or the VEC website at www.votereducationcoalition.org. WOW 6 will be showing a replay of this forum several times over the next few weeks. It will also be available anytime on 6lawrence.com. We would like to thank the City of Lawrence and their staff for the use of their facility and all their help in making this event possible. Now, the rules for the forum are very simple. I will be asking the questions, and each question will have a designated response time. Candidates will answer the questions, and at the end of the period, you'll hear a bell, and we'll move on to the next candidate or the question. The next candidate should be ready to take the podium as soon as the person before them is done answering. We will rotate the order of the responses between each candidate. There will be no rebuttals and no questions from the candidates. To start things off, we'll have opening statements. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to open, and we'll start with you, Mr. Denny.
Well, thank you, and thanks to the Voter Education Coalition and WOW for hosting this and the opportunity to participate. I'm Jim, excuse me. I'm Jim Denny, and I want to work for you as County Commissioner for District 3. I'm a 40-year resident of Douglas County, and I have been working for you for over 35 years as a public servant in responsible leadership roles, and I want to continue helping Douglas County be the great place to live and work that it is. I want to point out that a county commissioner does more than just meet and greet and be in attendance at public activities. They make decisions that affect your life and the community. And I think my history and background has prepared me best of all the candidates to serve you as commissioner. I have the experience and leadership capabilities to make those decisions, keeping in mind that I work for you. Please check my website at www.electjimdenny.com and compare. Thanks for taking your time to come and listen to the candidates today. And I would appreciate your vote on August 2nd and again in November.
Mr. Weaver.
Well, again, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. And just to talk a little bit about myself, my name is Jim Weaver, and I'm about a 20-year resident of Douglas County out by Lecompton. I live on a small farm out there, and we have a few animals, and we participated in county government quite a little bit. Biggest reason I'm running is I am so proud of Douglas County. They are truly a shining star in the state of Kansas. We deal with problems directly, we take care of our issues, and we make sure that things are getting done correctly and people are being treated fairly. And I want to be a part of that. I've been in public employment for over 40 years. I worked 33 years in the fire service in Topeka, up to a level of deputy chief. And so I had a lot of responsibility there, including some terrorism activities that happened after 9/11, being in command of those situations. So I have been around very, very critical public problems and been involved with taking care of those and communicating with the public. Thank you.
Bassam.
Hello, my name is Bassam Shaheen. I am 31 years old, and I really want to thank all of you for coming today and for hearing what I have to say. So, first, I'm 31 years old. I import, export, and manufacture tobacco products. I employ about 30 employees and have 5 lounges. My main goal is to make sure there's roofs in their heads. And just like one of our candidates has said, we are the ones all the way in the bottom of the ballot when you go and vote that actually make a change. And my goals are going to be about solving the mental health crisis, bringing in economic development, and affordable housing. Thank you.
Mr. Russo.
I'm Michelle DeRusso. I was raised to be an active participant in my community. For the past 27 years, I've had the privilege of continuing my civic engagement in Douglas County, serving with many organizations, including Junior Achievement, LEAP, American Red Cross, Blue Santa, Go Red for Women, Kids Voting, Live Strong Leader for the state of Kansas, Penny Jones, Special Olympics, the Rock Chalk Roundball Classic, 14 years as a United Way campaign coordinator, secretary for the Lawrence St. Patrick's Day Parade, current chairman of Douglas County Valor, and founding member, past treasurer, and current president of the Lawrence Police Foundation. This has provided me a wide range of experience, understanding, and insight into the picture that is Douglas County. I look at the opportunity to serve in the role of county commissioner as a natural next step and consider it my civic responsibility to continue working to build a stronger Douglas County.
All right. With that, we'll begin. This first question will start with Mr. Weaver. You'll have 2 minutes to answer, as will everyone. What is your position on the future of the mental health crisis unit as well as the Douglas County Jail expansion?
This is going to be a tremendous issue for the county, I think, in the upcoming years and months. I certainly support the county's efforts in looking into the issues that are related to criminal justice as it relates to imbalance in racial people that are arrested and put to jail in a disproportionate number. I think that it's a very, very good step to try to classify people that are coming to the jail in a situation where we know that they're that are incarcerated with people of the same type of classification, and so that people with mental illness maybe would be able to be diverted to the mental health court and find treatment as opposed to being just incarcerated and exacerbating their problems that they already have. I think that the mental health court is going to be a great step, and again, something that Douglas County has taken the lead on in this state, so that we have a chance to show the rest of Kansas that we don't have to just keep putting people in jail. Let's find an appropriate place for them relative to what got them there in the first place. The jail is about 20 years old. It does need some refurbishment so that those classification activities can be done appropriately, then they can keep people segregated and in appropriate classes. 20 years is not a long time for a building that costs that much money, but the population has changed. There are a lot more female prisoners that come into the jail, and we have to be able to deal with that issue as well as all the mental health and drug and PTSD and all those other issues that those people that are coming into the jail do. Finding alternative ways, whether it's OR bonds or ankle bracelets or some supervision to get people to court dates, I think will be a critical step in getting people out of the jail and so they can take care of their families.
Bassam.
Okay, I am all for the new development of the mental health center. Right now, and the county needs to be more involved. We're criminalizing them and they're humans, and they need help. We need to help them and not keep them in jail. Because again, there is no other place for them to go. And I tell you what, the jail doesn't even want them there as well. And about the expansion of the jail, if you have visited the jail, you can see how sad it is that it's overpopulated, especially the women's division. So I am also, I promise to keep in talks with the sheriff. But again, those two do go hand in hand, and I'm all for it.
Mr. Russo.
Okay. I'm in favor of addressing this issue. It's very important. As far as the jail, there's many issues at the jail on different levels, but all of which affect the safety of the jail population and the employees. It is necessary to find alternatives to incarceration, as well as ensure everyone there has a valid reason for being there while still being consistent with public safety. Right now at the jail, they are unable to observe someone before placing them in the general population to see if they could be in danger or be a danger to others. They have one small pod for females, so nonviolent offenders are housed with violent offenders. So these are, serious safety issues that need to be addressed with the regular population as well as the mental health issue. And the mental health issue is something that's very close to my heart for personal family reasons. And I've been following this for quite a while. I have attended both of the Justice Matters Nehemiah assemblies. I've attended the virtual tour lunch at Bert Nash. I've taken mental health first aid and have met with David Johnson. As a member of the Lawrence Police Foundation, we've been funding the crisis intervention team training for local law enforcement and other agencies for the last year. It's a 40-hour class which trains personnel to better respond to individuals experiencing a mental health crisis. To date, we're proud to have provided training funds for 94 people, plus another 50 will be trained next month. And this includes people from Bert Nash, Willow, headquarters, as well as the police department, sheriff's office, our 911 operators, Baldwin, Eudora Police, and the KU Public Safety, and many others.
Mr. Denny.
First of all, I agree with many of the things that the other candidates here have said. My background is 25 years, among other things, is 25 years in law enforcement as Director of Public Safety for KU for about 20 years. I also was the head of emergency communications. That's the 911 center where the 911 operators and dispatchers she's talking about work. I've seen the change in how our society deals with mentally ill people. And I believe we need to reverse what's been happening for the last decade. The issue of a crisis unit, I think, is critical. I think there are people in jail who should not be in jail, not because the law enforcement officers did something wrong, but because there is no place else left to put them. Those of you that were here earlier heard the state people talk about mental health facilities that have been closed. That has a real effect. I can tell you that when that jail was built, it was built to hold about half of the capacity that they're talking about that exists there now on an overnight basis and farmed out elsewhere, which is a very expensive thing, by the way. About $100,000 a month gets spent on farming out prisoners. Meanwhile, the population of Douglas County has increased about 15%, but the jail population has doubled. What's going on? Some of that is the mental health issue that we've been talking about. The County Commission put in place a Criminal Justice Coordinating Council to look at these issues. Why is this happening? What can be done about it? I think we need to back the work of that council. I think it's very important. It has to be done. If you pull out the mental health issues, by my unofficial figuring, you might solve about 20% of the overcrowding problem. Well, if you put 15% of the population increase, 20% of, at best, where did the rest of it come from? We need to find that out and fix whatever those issues are. Thank you.
Next question. How would you balance the needs of rural and urban residents of Douglas County? You each get 90 seconds for this question, and we'll start with Mr. Shaheen.
We need to bring in economic development in both sides of the spectrum here between the rural and the urban. Of course, urban being more land and rural being where they'll be living and the housing and affordable housing. So I feel like we have to work in both sides and see what abatements and what we can do to bring in primary businesses into our urban areas. I'm not saying, especially, I don't know if you know about that, but we have primary land here. We have primary soil. I'm not saying we need to cement it or do anything. I'm just saying let's utilize it. Let's bring in primary businesses. I'm talking manufacturing, tech, basically manufacturing, tech, agriculture. So I think that will really help us with bringing in money from out of our county into our county and make it go in a circle for our secondary businesses in our urban locations to survive. Right now, we're in a plateau. So that's why I'm very pushing on economic development and see what we can discuss and, of course, bring a balance into that here in our county.
Mr. Rousseau.
One of my priorities is to ensure an equal voice for our rural and city residents. I began attending the township board meetings in January and have, for the most part, attended all 6 township meetings monthly since then. And the number one thing that I hear at those meetings, in addition to the Lecompton City Council meetings, is they don't feel that they have an equal voice right now. And even last night, as I was leaving the ice cream social at the Clinton Museum, they asked me, are you going to represent us? Well, of course I'm going to represent them. I'm going to represent the city. I work in the city. I live outside of the city. I think sometimes they feel like they get lost in the shuffle because so much of the focus is on Lawrence, because that is where a majority of our population is. But we're talking about a 455 square mile county, 9 townships, 4 cities, and there's a lot going on out there. And depending on what part of the county you're in, there are different issues and needs that need to be addressed. So it's a priority that we make sure they have an equal voice.
Well, I lived in the city of Lawrence for about a little over 7 years, and then about 35 years ago, I moved out into the county and live in the rural area. I was born as a child of the only siblings in 2 large families that did not have farms. That meant that I got to be the farmhand every summer from the time I was about 5 until I graduated from high school. I think I have a really good understanding of the issues and problems that face rural residents of the county. I am really concerned about the rural area remaining rural and keeping the kind of character that we have here. While I lived in the county, I worked at the university. I worked at 111 East 11th, about as far downtown as you can get, for 10 additional or 11 additional years. And I worked with citizens of the city of Lawrence and the governments of the city of Lawrence. I worked with the governments and departments and various entities and citizens of Baldwin, Eudora, Lecompton, and indeed every township in the county. I think I can put a good face on the issues as they affect both city and rural.
Mr. Weaver.
Well, I worked for the Douglas County Conservation District for 7 years, and I worked with the farmers and the ranchers and those rural people out there doing their best to raise crops, to raise livestock, and to make a living on the farm because they love it out in the country. And I live out there as well, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. I love Lawrence, but I love my farm more than any place else. And so the work that we did was to help keep the soil where it belongs, keep our water clean, and if that's not an issue to you, just look at Flint, Michigan. We have to make sure we're protecting those natural resources. And to do that, I think we have to let people in the city know what farmers are doing to protect the soil and the water, and to make sure that the wildlife places are still out there in the county that a lot of people don't get to see. I would like to see a county commission meeting in each of the townships, just once a year maybe, so that you take the commissioners out to the people and they can kind of see how business is done. I think that would go a long way to making people believe that this county commission is working for them. So I think it's really important. And I think my experience as a labor negotiator and a union president and bringing people together is really important. We did programs with the district where we'd educate people that are moving to the country and tell them there are going to be sights and sounds and smells that you're not used to, and you need to know what that's going to be like. And so I think we have to educate the city people about what the farmers are doing, and we also need the farmers to understand the needs of the people within the city.
Mrs. DeRusso, you can start this question. There has been controversy in the past regarding the county inspection process. How would you ensure the process is fair and equitable? Each of you will get 90 seconds to answer.
There have been some past issues with that, and recently the county commission did hire a company to do a review of the department. They have a new department head who I believe has about 40 years of experience. The report came back with some recommendations for changes and things that could be done to hopefully get things so that they are fair and equitable. And so I think that the county commission and the efforts that they have made to address those issues are, they're moving forward, and it's really just started, so we're going to need to give it time to see how that works out.
Mr. Denny.
You stole my answer. No, that is the answer. The county has taken steps to address those concerns. The study that was done was a very good one. I've also met and talked with the new director of that department. and sat through some meetings where they talked about the changes that are being made and they want to make. And I think they're on the right path. I think my function as a commissioner will be to ensure that they stay on that path.
Mr. Weaver.
I've heard a lot about tales out in the county, people that felt like they weren't treated very fairly by the building inspectors or by the zoning and codes. My personal experience, I built a garage on our place. It's an 1880s farmhouse, and I wanted it to match the house. So to do that, I had to jump through quite a few hoops to do it. It cost some extra money, but the inspectors that came out there and helped me were very, very good. What problem I see that was identified in the study that's been mentioned is that those inspectors need better training in the skilled trades so that you don't have someone out there that's looking at a complicated electrical configuration and don't really have an idea what that's about. So, and I think that's being done right now with the county, so that all of them are becoming better trained about how they do that. And I've always said that code enforcement has to be firm and it has to be fair. And there has to be a reasonable method to resolve differences if it comes right down to that, where the landowner says, this is not right, I should not have to make this thing this big or this expensive. I should be able to make it so that it's stable and that it works. And someone has to mediate that argument and come to a great decision so it'll be good buildings in the county and we get accountability with the county inspectors.
All right. Mr. Shaheen.
The code and zonings are there basically to save lives. So I know they are trying really hard in the county to make sure that those two are perfected. And again, like you said, we do need to train them better. There are more newer things going on, more newer technology in buildings, and I know that they're trying very hard to make it happen, of course. And to tell you the truth, that's all I have for that. And so far from what I heard, especially from the county commission, is that they are working really hard to make sure the zoning and the zoning and the codes are taken care of. And
Okay. This next questions, we'll start with you, Mr. Denny. What are your feelings on wind power in Douglas County? What is your position on the recently approved regulations approved by the commission? Each of you get 90 seconds to answer.
I think renewable energy is an important thing, and I think wind power is going to be a component of that in the future. Douglas County really only has a fairly narrow strip of land that runs along 56 Highway that has enough wind that's useful for wind energy producing wind farms, if you will. I think our county commission did a really good job in putting a moratorium on any construction until we could get some decent policies in effect. That has been done. I've looked at the report that they produced. I think they did a good job. I'm sure there's going to be some bugs in it, as with every new set of laws, and I'll be prepared to work with that.
Mr. Weaver?
I certainly agree that finding alternative energy sources is extremely important, and wind is one in Kansas. Maybe not so much in Douglas County, but certainly it is in Kansas. The regulations that were passed, I think, were very thoughtful. There were a lot of meetings that went about talking with landowners and setback distances for these tremendous tall towers so that they don't so they don't impinge on another landowner's property too much, to protect wildlife. A lot of those things have been considered in this new set of regulations, and I think it's well put together. I think it allows people that want to do those on their own places are able to do that, and we can get that additional energy that we so desperately need. One thing that I was particularly happy about in the regulations is the fact that someone who puts up one of these towers has to purchase a performance bond so that if and when that company goes bankrupt, they've got to put that land back to the way it was before it started. Because there's nothing I do not want to see is a whole bunch of towers with no propellers on them just standing out in the county doing nothing.
Mr. Shaheen?
okay, so renewable energy is economic development. Okay, that's bringing in jobs, and it will be very good for our county and for our city. We need it, and right now, it will. What I mean by bringing in jobs, everybody here is leaving, and there is no jobs in Lawrence except for secondary businesses. So from what I heard about opening some kind of renewable energy is going to bring in over, I think, like a few hundred jobs. So, I mean, I'm all for it. We need it here in Lawrence and in our county.
Mr. Russo.
As Mr. Denny said, there's a very small strip of the county that's actually even good for the wind energy, and that's down in Marion and Willow Springs townships. And what I heard from many of the people down there was, when you look at the wind farms in, like, let's say western Kansas and central Kansas, those are much larger parcels of land. Homes are much more spread out down out there. Here in Douglas County, we have much smaller parcels of land, so there's a lot of concern about proximity to neighbors and the intrusion that would cause. I think they did a good job of addressing that. The company that had originally come in looking at Douglas County has since pulled out. And it's important to know there are two different wind energy systems that were addressed, and one's for personal use. So the smaller ones that I think are like 90 to 100 feet tall, in addition to the commercial size ones. So I think they did a very good job of addressing that, enabling people to have a personal one. What's going to be interesting is if a company does come back to Douglas County and wants to put something in place, it'll be interesting to sit down and look at where and how and what and how that's going to fit into our policy.
Next question. Should the county continue to contribute $200,000 to the Lawrence Chamber for economic development efforts? Why or why not? We'll start with you, Mr. Weaver. You each have 90 seconds.
I think it's absolutely necessary for the county to participate in those economic development activities. We've got to have jobs in the county. They've got to be accountable. They've got to be productive, good paying jobs. And I think for the county to participate in that program is certainly a good thing. I do think, though, that the Chamber of Commerce maybe should have a little bit additional oversight by county administrators a little bit. I hear a lot of grumblings about that being just a good old boys club out there that's taking care of those people that are influential in the county and always have been. So I'd like to see some more oversight of the Chamber of Commerce or participation by county commissioners on the chamber to make sure that things are being done appropriately.
Mr. Shaheen.
Yes, of course they should. They're the guys who are really trying to bring in businesses here in Lawrence. That's what I mean by when I say primary businesses. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for techs. They're looking for they're looking for manufacturing companies, again, to come here and bring in and hire the minimum wage. I mean, I talked to somebody from the Chamber of Commerce, and he was saying that $240,000 is the average price for a home here in Lawrence, and the average salary is $40,000. There's no way they can afford those, and all our KU students graduating and leaving us, being like my brother being one of them, and they can't stay here because there's no jobs that they can get, and they have to eventually move to Kansas City or whatever. But yes, I'm all for it. Anybody that can help us bring in jobs here, especially economic development and growth with balance, yes.
Mrs. DeRusso?
You know, I think it's important that we keep paying the chamber to help us with our economic development, because it's not something that the county has, we don't have the expertise in that. We don't have the staff to do that. It's something that they specialize in. They work with the state. They work with organizations in Kansas City that are out there trying to attract national and international companies. And, it's a long process. It's not like it happens overnight. I think we need to exercise some patience. And, there's a lot of good that has come out of some of the partnerships with the Chamber. A perfect example is the Bioscience Technology Business Center. They just recently hit the 200-employee, $11 million payroll mark. I mean, that's all right here in Douglas County. I mean, that's a big deal. And that's a unique partnership with the city, the county, the Department of Commerce, KU, and the Lawrence Chamber. So I think it's important that we continue looking to see how they can help us grow our economy.
Mr. Denny?
Again, I'm in agreement with the rest of the panel. I think the Chamber is an absolutely necessary organization. I see it as their function is to try to bring businesses to Douglas County, to the cities in Douglas County, and to try to help the businesses start up locally as well. Whether or not it's $200,000 at this point in time with budget discussions just coming up, I don't know that that's absolutely the right amount, nor am I really in a position to know because I'm not a commissioner at this time. I think it's government's role to then approve or disapprove the type of business and put whatever conditions that our local citizens want to have on the businesses that go into effect here in Douglas County. But the Chamber is indispensable.
All right. Next question, we'll start with Mr. Shaheen. Would you be in favor of expanding the number of commissioners on the board? You have 60 seconds.
That's a really good question. So from what I know is if I do win, hopefully, I can't talk to other commissioners, of course, unless we're in public, and which is fine. But if we were like the city of Florence, where we have 5 commissioners and we can have public hearings between like 2 and 2, like I know 2 city commissioners can talk together and come up to a better answer, then I always think a little is better. But 3, I don't know. I mean, 3 is fine. But again, I do like the way the city of Florence has their commission set up.
Mrs. DeRusso?
Yeah, I would be in favor of increasing the number of commissioners. One of the reasons I think that our community has grown a great deal. We have a very large population, and that might help address some of the issues of ensuring an equal voice for all of our rural and city residents. If you look around the state, granted there's 91 counties out of 105 that have 3 commissioners, but if you look at the population of those counties, they're nothing like Douglas County. If you look at the larger counties like Sedgwick, Wyandotte, and Johnson, they all have at least 5. So yes, I would be in favor of that.
Mr. Denny?
I've wrestled with that question for some time, having been a county employee for a long time. What Mr. Russo said is true. The larger counties do have 5. I also know that Douglas County there's a large gap between Douglas County and the counties that she named. I'm not so sure that it's reached that point that 5 is necessary. I think 3 is a very efficient way of doing things. It's worked well for many years in Douglas County. The county government really has 3 functions. Public safety is its largest, roads is its 2nd largest, and health and welfare of its citizens is its 3rd largest. It doesn't have the numerous items necessarily that some of the larger cities and larger counties might have.
Mr. Weaver?
I would not be in favor of changing something that's working so well. I think Douglas County has been around for a lot of years, and we function pretty well with 3 commissioners. It is uncomfortable. It's a little bit awkward that commissioners can't speak with one another and they can't go to meetings and be places like that unless all 3 are there and they're conducting business. So I think that's a problem. But I do think that if we elect qualified commissioners that are willing to spend the time it takes to make good decisions, and the county hires adequate staff with the expertise to give advice, that 3 is enough, and we don't need to change something that's not broken.
We'll start with you, Mrs. DeRusso, on this next question. What would be your input on the commission regarding support for Douglas County seniors? You have 90 seconds.
Support for Douglas County seniors?
Mhm.
It's a pretty big issue. The county went through a phase where they were trying to attract retirees to Douglas County. And in doing so, as this group has begun to age, they have a lot of needs and services that need to be met. So, you look at Douglas County Senior Services, you look at Jayhawk Area Agency on Aging, and all of those, their budget needs are increasing because of the number of retirees that move to Lawrence. Through our you know, trying to attract that age group. So it's very important now that we've invited them and they've moved to our community, that now we have to support them with the services that are necessary.
Okay. Mr. Denny.
I think this falls into the last area I talked about, the health and welfare of its citizens. Again, those of you who were here for the earlier forum heard the state people talk about the home-based community service, or HBCS, and the budgets that are being cut for those agencies that provide the sorts of things that seniors may need: meals in their homes, a little support, a bath every once or twice a week, someone to be there. They also cut that to the developmentally disabled. You heard about Cottonwood, and I'm very familiar with Cottonwood, and have been family members, been a client for many years. But they're also looking at having to cut support to people who are developmentally disabled. And some of those are aging, some of those are seniors, some of them are in their 70s, some of them still live out in the city and may not be able to with the kind of budget cuts that go on. The county has taken a step already in recently passing the accessory housing resolution that allows seniors to build a living area in their house for someone to stay there and take care of them, whether it be their child or someone that they hire. It's absolutely critical that the county look at these issues that affect our seniors.
Mr. Weaver.
Well, the population is aging, and I'm going right along with that. The way I see it, the way we keep young is to have activities for our seniors that can keep them active and involved. We've got to have things that they can do within the city. I'd be glad to have them out to my farm and drag them around in a wagon. And you'd never believe how much of a smile that puts on people's faces. And if we can keep our spirits up, we can be healthier longer. And I think their health is critical. I think it's a shame that the state and the national governments are reducing those investments in our seniors, and I think we can do much better for that. But to me, the key is going to be have services and have activities for seniors that mean something to them, that gives them some meaning to their life, and lets them be as healthy and as productive as they can, as long as they can.
Mr. Shaheen?
Douglas County is the best place, I believe, for senior citizens compared to where I've been, where I traveled to the Middle East and to Russia and Japan, and I've never seen such a better system than what we have here in Douglas County. They really do care for them, and like you said, we do have some services that they go to, like the Red Dog Days, where they, and also, like you said, the Douglas County Senior Services. But of course, with the cuts that are going to happen, it is very scary, and they don't, I mean, they're taxpayers, and they have to be comfortable on this.
The next question, we'll start with Mr. Denny. How do you feel about city expansion within the county? You each have 90 seconds to answer.
Well, I think, for one thing, city expansion in the county is inevitable. So I think what we're talking about is the rate and how much, how fast. I know the city of Lawrence has been talking about, excuse me, for some time about growing up instead of out, and not and trying to limit the sprawl. I think that's a good approach to take. If the cities are expanding, very likely that means the economy is improving, and that there are jobs for these people to live in. There may even be businesses in the expansion area. So I'm wanting to look at planning. I also spent 3 years on the Planning Commission. Planning ahead, how do we want this growth to occur? It bothers me that we've heard, well, we can't let this happen because it's premature. We haven't got around to planning it, when it's been being talked about for several years, and we haven't planned for it yet. And I think that's the way you respond to those kinds of problems. Plan ahead.
Mr. Weaver?
I agree that planning is critical, and also critical is property owners' rights. When I talk to farmers out in the county, they're scared to death. They don't want to see the city coming their way. They think the services they currently have are adequate, that they're going to have to pay more taxes to support city services. But on the other hand, we're gaining law enforcement, fire service, and emergency management, all those things that can come out to the county and help out those people that are out in rural areas. I'd love to have a tornado siren close to my place. My wife would be a little bit more comfortable, I think. But that doesn't happen everywhere. So when we plan correctly and we allow for open space and some wild space even around developments, people are going to be more satisfied in their homes, I think, to see that they're still a part of nature, that they can enjoy that and to have that be a part of their lives, even though they may be in the city. I've seen areas in the city currently where houses have been built right on stream banks, and the stream banks are eroding and tearing out fences. So that was some really, really poor planning on the city's part to do those kinds of things. So we need to talk to those farmers out there that have the streams and the rivers that are on their places and make sure we have setback ordinances that are appropriate to keep houses away from there. Keep the riparian areas healthy so that we don't have eroding stream banks and putting more sediment into the lake. So I think all that planning is very, very critical, but it's also one of those things where we have to be able to bring those people together. So talk to the farmers, talk to the developers, and those people that are wanting to put the city farther out.
Right. Mr. Shaheen?
Okay, so it has to be balanced and logical. I mean, I noticed on the west side of town, all what I'm seeing are secondary businesses, which is fine. It's a lot like pizza shops is what I'm talking about, burger joints, and all that. Those are what they call secondary businesses. Now, I'm not seeing any of the primary businesses being built in that area if we're already giving abatements or incentives for those, because we need primary businesses in those locations. And to bring in people that make over $50,000 a year, for example, because right now every business that I see in that side of town is minimum paid wage jobs. And so yeah, it is growing and our economy is doing better, but I'm just looking 5 years from now where that's what is going to hurt us, is the fact that we are opening all these businesses, but none of them are over $50,000 a year jobs, where they can live and afford a roof in their heads. So that's what
Mrs. DeRusso?
As Mr. Denny said, it's inevitable, but I do think it's important that it's done with proper foresight and planning with a focus on responsible growth and in accordance with what the community's vision is for directing future land development. A lot of time is spent on the Horizon 2020 and all kinds of planning to set forth what the community thinks they wanted, and that was a joint city and county council that did that. So it's, we need to look at that as a policy guide to kind of see where we're headed and just make sure that we're not just growing to grow.
Next question, we'll start with Mr. Weaver. What qualifications do you look for when making appointments to county boards? You each have 90 seconds.
Well, certainly the first thing we'd want to look at is the activity of the board that the person is up for appointment, and to have some background and some specific knowledge in those different areas for each of these different boards. And there are a lot of them out there. So finding qualified people that know what they're talking about is certainly the first thing. Somebody who's going to be honest and open-minded and willing to compromise. Somehow, compromise has become a dirty word. I think that we have to be able to find people that are able to get in the middle of a room, have a discussion with a whole lot of different views, and come out with a good decision. To me, in my management experience with the fire service, those were the best decisions we could possibly get, was where we had a whole lot of discussion, and in the fire service, a whole lot of pretty heated discussion, and got answers to those questions. So finding people that are able to compromise, able to argue effectively and be courteous, that's what I would look for.
All right. Mr. Shaheen.
Okay. So I would look for civility, openness, and cooperation. And civility, because if they're joining that board, they are there to help. They're taking the time out of their kids and families to be there for them, to help out with whatever is needed. And what I mean by openness is they're open to any ideas and welcome thoughts to the county that come in. Again, it comes in with civility. And the last thing is cooperation, no matter what side of the aisle there are, that they will be, they want to try to find the common core. But that's fine.
Mrs. DeRusso.
I'd look for somebody with experience and background in that specific issue. Somebody that's committed to the process and willing to put in the time, and someone who's receptive, respectful, and professional. And I say all that because they do need to get along and work well with the other people on that board, as well as remember that they need to be professional and that they are representing the county.
And Mr. Denny.
Well, I think first, you're looking for someone who has an interest or maybe even a passion for whatever the subject of that board is. They want to do what that board does. They're not just looking for a credential, something to put on a resume. I think you need to look for people that have common sense, and back again to being able to make good decisions. The background is important depending on the boards. There are some boards where you want somebody who has a technical knowledge of the subject matter to be on that board, but some of them are less specific. Lastly, but not least important, as everybody else has said, with somebody who can work well with others. If they don't play nice, then they may not accomplish anything. Need to cooperate and be able to compromise.
This next question comes from the audience, and we'll start with you, Mr. Shaheen. What should the county do regarding securing public buildings due to the change in concealed carry? Which buildings would you prioritize? How would you pay for it? 90 seconds.
90 seconds? Okay. Not add it because I knew that might come in. Okay, so I would definitely look at community centers and higher education. I think conceal and carry is a constitutional right, but not in our not in our community centers and higher education, especially in my businesses downtown. That is very scary. My employees get scared, and they frighten away my customers. And but if we have to pick, I would definitely recommend the higher education and the community centers. I think you never know what happens, or I'm not for it anyways. So,
And how would you pay for it?
how would I pay for it? Good. Okay. I really don't know how. We have to talk to the city and to our county. It is a very county. I believe it has to be through our local government also, but we have to bring some kind of fund in to be able to put those in our buildings, and especially when you go drive up KU or KU classes. But I don't know how that goes. But sorry.
Mrs. DeRusso.
Well, this question came up, a similar question came up the other night. For those of you that attend the Lawrence City Commission meetings, there's always a police officer in this room for those meetings. Some nights there might be more than one police officer, because unfortunately sometimes people do make threats, sometimes people do get upset or passionate about an issue or unhappy about a decision. Just to look at a couple of buildings that come to mind off the top of my head, of course, City Hall, the courthouse, the law enforcement judicial building, which currently does have, it's like going through airport security to get into that building. So then the question becomes, okay, well, what do you do once you realize someone's allowed to carry and they walk in and you know that they have a gun? Do you keep an eye on them? Do you alert people? What do you do? Do you start putting someone in the county commission room for their meetings? Someone from the sheriff's office? And then the question does become, how do you pay for it? I think it's something we'd have to look at as a priority, and would have to find a way to fit it into the budget at budget time when we're looking at the big picture and all the items, so that we can figure out where it fits into the scheme of things.
Mr. Denny.
And I also am assuming this question involves, the allowing firearms in public buildings. And I have to say, I carried a gun for 25 years. One of the happiest days of my life was when I didn't have to carry that gun anymore. I don't know why anybody would want to do it, but Kansas law says you can now. I think there's 3 places a gun never belongs: courtrooms, bars, and government offices. Now, the only thing as a county commissioner that we have anything to say about is the county commission meeting room and the courtroom area of the LEC, as Mr. Russo mentioned. I think we have to do whatever is necessary to secure them from people being able to bring weapons in there. How we pay for that, I have to sit here and tell you, I'm not sure. It has to be paid for. It's a public safety item. It's one of those things that I believe is not discretionary. If you are going to guarantee that nobody has the ability to carry a gun in those areas, you have to take whatever steps is necessary to do that. Thank you.
Mr. Weaver.
This is such a tough issue. The only thing that I can see, given the current state of laws in the state of Kansas, is to educate employees in the public buildings that this is lawful, that those people have a right to carry weapons there, and that we need to develop plans within each of those public buildings on how we're going to react if something goes south. I don't think we can just sit back and say everybody that's carrying a gun in there is doing it with good intent. There's no way to know that. We can't screen that. We can't say this is a good guy with a gun, this is a bad guy with a gun. That's just not going to work. So I think educating employees about the fact that that guns can be carried in public buildings, let them know action plans if something goes south, and increased readiness on the part of the police department and the sheriff's department to respond should something does go south. Paying for that's going to have to come out of the county budget somehow to train people adequately. There are a lot of training programs that are out there for churches and schools about what to do in an active shooter situation. So there are some things that we can do. But right now, that's the way it is in Kansas, and I hope that changes.
All right. Mrs. DeRusso, we'll start with you on this next question. How would you foster cooperation between city and county school districts? 90 seconds.
Between the county and the school districts, or between the
City-
school?
Between city and county school districts.
Okay, so between the county and the school districts, or between county school districts?
How would you foster cooperation between city and county school districts?
Or between the county and the school districts, maybe?
I don't think she needs it, it's just the county districts, I think she
Okay.
needs it's the entire bodies, the 3 bodies.
Okay, so the cities, the counties, and the school districts? Okay. The school districts have their own boards, they do their own decision-making. And in Douglas County, we have a unique, well, it's probably not unique, but school districts don't fall within county borders. There are actually 8 different school districts in Douglas County. So we're not just looking at Eudora, Baldwin, and Lawrence school districts. I know that there's, some cooperation. I know in the past that the county has tried to help when there have been shortfalls in funding. But, it becomes difficult because you can't just say, we're going to help this school district, and then you have 7 other school districts out there that you're not doing anything with. So it's, there's really only so much that you can do with the school districts. They have their own budgets, their funding. They have local option budgets. You know, they have a lot of different options, but it's hard for the county to just say, we're going to help this one and not help another one.
It's a difficult question for many of the reasons Mr. DeRusso just said. But I think it's important to understand that the city government, county government, and school board administration are three separate political bodies. The school board purpose is to do something completely different than what the county government is doing. Their focus is strictly on how to educate the children. There nonetheless sometimes results in controversy between the two bodies, or at least confusion. And one of the things that I would like to see is better communication, and that's what I think is needed to help in that situation. For both of those bodies to realize that while they may have a slightly different governmental purpose, that they need to communicate because they're affecting the same citizens, the same tax base. Special concern about taxation, what one is doing when the other one is doing something, and perhaps communicating on the issues of what's the cost going to be to the taxpayers for their service in the next few years.
Again, a really tough issue and a big one. When you start talking about all the taxing entities that exist in the county today, between the school districts and the townships and everybody else that's collecting taxes out there, I think all those agencies kind of need to talk together. Certainly there's going to be some efficiencies on some shared services that might be able to be done. I think they need to have kind of a conceptual idea of what's tolerable. People are tired of seeing taxes raised all over the place, and I don't like them. I lived on taxes for a number of years, so I try not to complain about my taxes at all. But people are concerned about them, and it affects sometimes how they're able to live. So I think having all those taxing entities somehow keep tabs on one another so that nobody gets out of whack. Maybe try and find some shared services we could maybe do and have some efficiencies that way. That's about all I can see that could be done like that.
Mr. Shaheen?
Can't talk too much about the school district, but like you said, it is a very important topic with what's going on with the budgeting in both sides of the spectrum. We just want to make sure that our county and their kids are safe to go to school. Maybe that's where we can come in. And but again, like about the school district, I just don't have too much information about. And that's it.
Okay. We'll start with Mr. Denny for this next question. What is the role of the county commission in providing support for the community shelter? 90 seconds.
First of all, I think they need to support things such as the community shelter, and in particular the community shelter. We talked a little bit earlier about people in jail, and I think a community shelter is one of those things that perhaps helps control the population in jail. Their function in the community is an important one. And as far as the county's role, I think it's to do whatever they can do to ensure that something like that exists and is funded to the level it needs to be funded.
Okay. Mr. Weaver?
I agree. The county commission has to be involved. They need to know what's going on in the shelters and all these different agencies that are out there providing services to the public. I think if we could take some time, again, this is one of those hazards about having a three-member commission, but get a commissioner out to each of those things, even individually, and take visits out there and see what's going on. Pay attention during budget time about what their performance has been, and reward those programs that have been doing some good, and maybe try and bolster up some that are not. So I think it's an oversight thing, not an overreach thing. I think we need to help them out, try to help them find alternative ways to do better service and to do more service for those folks that need it. This isn't a big issue out in the county among the rural people. They certainly have their needs, but out there, people tend to take care of themselves. So it's more an urban issue than it is a rural issue, but it still is very, very important.
Mr. Shaheen?
It's our civic responsibility to be involved with the shelter. Also, visiting the shelter, I do see a lot of people with mental health needs as well, either through addiction, and it is a crisis for them because they don't have another place to go except either to the shelter or the jail, and so yes, we do really need to be involved with the shelter and help again with the budgeting that's going on that we need for that as well, because again there is no money going in to help these people with mental health in the shelter as well. And but yeah, so that's what I think it's a civil responsibility to be a part of helping out with the shelter.
Mrs. DeRusso?
Okay. A short version of the county's mission statement is to provide for the safety and well-being of the citizens of Douglas County. So well-being, that definitely falls under well-being, and one of the six core services of the county is community support. So I think it's very important that we continue supporting the community shelter. I've been out there and met with them, and I've toured it, and I've seen what they're trying to do. I think what probably disappointed me most with what happened out there is that there wasn't the proper foresight to plan that when they built this nice, new, bigger and better shelter, that obviously it was going to attract more people. The maintenance was going to be more, all the expenses were going to be higher. I don't think the city or the county planned very well for that, and that's what put them in the situation they were in, along with some issues with the past management. I think they're on track to try to improve that, but unfortunately, they got behind and got in a hole, and I really don't think it was through any fault of their own. I think it was poor planning by our leaders who didn't budget and plan for that.
Next question. Would you support banning the sale of fireworks in Douglas County? If not, would you favor adjusting the area in which fireworks could be sold? You each have 90 seconds to respond. We'll start with you, Mr. Weaver.
Well, you've heard my fire service background. I hate fireworks, but I think people want to celebrate, and I understand that. I couldn't support banning them altogether. I think asking law enforcement to enforce laws that say you can't light a firecracker in a city, or I have to see you light the fuse in order to arrest you, it's so doggone complicated. So maybe it's a public education campaign out front. Say, we're going to allow fireworks, but we want to make sure that our citizens stay safe, that we're not running fire trucks all over the county because bottle rockets are in the houses. And I've seen some really, really silly stuff happen. So I couldn't stomach banning them altogether because I know my kids love them, but I think community fireworks events that are sponsored by an agency are helpful, to have a big display somewhere where people can come see the stuff blow up and not their kids.
Mr. Shaheen.
No. My kids will kill me. I can't see not having fireworks on 4th of July and the New Year's, and I think it will be very boring, so no.
Mrs. DeRusso.
I am not in favor of banning fireworks in the county. Now, there are certain fireworks, I think they do a good job of trying to limit the type of fireworks for safety reasons, but like anything else, I think when used responsibly, fireworks are something that can be enjoyed, and that, there's a family tradition of enjoying fireworks on the 4th of July.
Okay. Mr. Denny.
No, I would not support banning fireworks in the county. Nor at this time do I think, and it's an interesting thing about changing the boundaries, perhaps. I'm assuming that's based on population level. Obviously, the more dense the population, the more problematic fireworks can become. As has been said, continuing education. of the public through news media and other outlets about what to do and what not to do. I would be willing to look at restricting perhaps some of the types of fireworks. One of the things I've noticed in recent years is there are some private fireworks that rival what professional fireworks people put on, and some sort of limit to that type of thing in terms of the size of the firework or the type of firework that's being set off. But no, I can't see banning fireworks for the 4th of July.
Our next question, we'll start with Mr. Shaheen. What are your thoughts on the value of the RAP program? Do you support continued county support of the RAP program? You have 60 seconds to respond.
I'm sorry, I'm not too familiar with the RAP program. So I'll move to the next one.
Mrs. DeRusso.
Yeah, several years ago, that was one of the things that the county helped the school districts with when their funding was short. The city, the county, and the school district, all three pitched in to continue the RAP program. And since that time, the city and the school district have cut back on their funding or stopped it altogether. But the county does continue through Bert Nash, that funding, and I think it's very important that it continues for our children.
Mr. Denny.
I'm not familiar with the details of the program just in general, and I would have to say, from what I know, I would support continuing to support it.
Okay,
I'm not familiar enough with the program to comment.
okay, all right. These are audience questions, and we'll start with you, Mrs. DeRusso. Would you be in favor of adding sexual orientation and gender identity as protected class in the county? Why or why not? You have 60 seconds.
You said sexual orientation.
And gender identity as
gender
protected
identity.
class in the county.
Well, I believe those are already protected on the federal level, right? So I mean, they're already protected categories from my understanding, so I don't know why we would be questioning that.
All right. Mr. Denny.
I'm wrestling with the idea of whether that would be a county commission function. There are some federal protections already there. In general, I don't like duplicating every level of government having the same laws repeated. In general, I think that our society has tended to demonize various components of our society, and we need to do what we can do to stop that. Exactly what we could do as a county commissioner, I'm not sure.
Mr. Weaver.
I would agree. I'm not sure that it is a county issue, and if there are adequate federal protections in place, I think we'd certainly want to support those.
Again, I'm pretty sure it's probably not a county commission issue, but again, they are, I believe, are protected and federally, and that's all I have. If you want it personally, I'm all for equal rights, but just to let you know. But I don't think it has to do anything with the county commission.
And this is the last question, and we'll start with Mr. Denny. What is your experience working with budgets? 90 seconds.
I started working with government budgets in 1976. Worked with the state budget, department head, administrator. I know the processes for state budgeting. I started working for and as such, at the university, I had to be aware of what the municipal budgets process were as well as the county because we had to interact with them and you have to coordinate activities. I then spent 11 years as a county department head. I went through budget hearings with the county every year, having to justify the budget. I'm familiar with the process. And in the 30-some years that I was in charge of a taxpayer's budget, I'd like to say I went over budget once. I'm a believer in balanced budgets. Obviously, things happen. But that's one of the basic tenets of what I'm running on is a balanced budget. I'm familiar with how the different processes of the different governments interact, and I'm really fairly comfortable with the budget process.
Well, I worked with the Conservation District here in the county and was responsible for putting that little budget together. It's a very small agency that does a lot of good work. So I think that's helpful to see how county government works and how those budgets intermesh and how we decide where the money goes. So that's just a small entity within the county. But with the fire department over in Topeka, I was a deputy chief for about 6 years. We had a budget of about $20 million. And we had to protect 150,000 people in the city, staff 200 firefighters and 12 fire stations. So it was a tough thing to go through there. And thankfully, the fire service has always had a good reputation and a good rapport with the community, so that the community never really had a big hue and cry about cutting fire department budgets. But we still were asked a number of different times to come in with 5% projection or 10% projection and try and make things work that way. I was always able to do that. It's painful at times, but it's certainly necessary to make sure we keep our taxes in check.
Having 30 employees and 5 businesses and dealing internationally with import and export, I think I live and breathe budget daily. I have to make sure, and every time we always met our yearly goals through our budgets. And that's the experience that I have, but not through actual being part of board members or part like that. But as for planning for budgets, I have years of experience of that and work really hard to maintain the goal and the numbers for every year. So that's what I have.
At my previous employer, I was responsible for the administrative budget. So for 14 years, I managed that. I sat through the budget meetings annually. And then on a personal level, I've served as the treasurer or organizer for many fundraisers, charities, and events in Douglas County. And for all of you that have been involved in those type of things, you know that the goal is to raise as much money as you possibly can. So, you know, at the end of the day, the goal is to provide a quality event or a quality product that people are going to want to come back to while getting the biggest bang for your buck. So I have quite a bit of experience with it.
Please define, we have more questions. This one's, we'll start with Mr. Weaver. Please define your position on continuing funding or increasing funding for the protection of historic, natural, or cultural resources in the county. 90 seconds.
A big focus of my campaign is going to be natural resources. I think it's critical. They're a finite resource. We could use them all up. And then what happens? If our water is gone, what happens? If we build over all of our prime soils, what are we going to eat? If we don't look at the culture of this county and how far it's come since the Civil War, where are we going to be? I think to know where you're going, you have to know where you've been. And so I think that we have to absolutely look at those cultural resources and the historic resources of the county. I live in a 125-year-old home. It was overgrown with vines. I took 6 loads of junk out of it before I could even begin to remodel. But now it's reasonably comfortable, I think. So I think it's very critical that the county continue to participate in those programs through the historic resources grants that have been done. I think we've got to be really careful about how we treat those things, because that's what we live on. We have to remember our history, preserve our resources, and understand what our culture is.
All right, Mr. Shaheen?
Unless you want our city and county to look like Topeka, we really need to fund our historic resources. They do such a great job. If you look at, of course, all the way from Ohio and what's going on over here, I mean, we do a really good job preserving our historic resources. But yeah, we need to keep funding. We need to grow, and we need to let the people of Florence also understand, especially if they don't live in that area, why it's very important for us to keep funding it, because it is part of Lawrence and it is part of our lives. And yeah.
Mrs. DeRusso?
Douglas County has a really unique and diverse history and natural resource. There was a lot that went on here around the Civil War. There's a lot of people that worked really hard in Eudora and outside of Baldwin and in Lecompton and out at Clinton to try to preserve our history. And it has to be preserved because we've seen from some of the buildings out there around the county that if you wait too long, they're gone and they can't be replaced. So, I think it's really important that we continue supporting that. And then as far as the natural, just as unique and diverse and beautiful, again, if you don't protect it, once it's too late, there's no turning back. So it has to be a focus.
Mr. Denny?
Well, I'm going to make it unanimous. I think it's critical to ensure the historical preservation of some of the unique items we have here in Douglas County. I mean, as Mr. Russo alluded to, the history here, especially in the Compton area and Lawrence, as well as in Baldwin, regarding the beginning of the Civil War, exists no place else. We have to be sure that it's maintained. Natural resources speaks for itself. As Mr. Weaver said, they're a finite resource. We need to protect them as long as we can. Funding of them is one of the major items, I think, that fall into the area of health and welfare for the citizens of Douglas County.
We'll start this next question with Mr. Shaheen. Do you believe the current mill levy is appropriate? Is it too high or too low? You each have 90 seconds to respond.
Of course it's too high. Again, look at our affordable housing. I don't even think that if we start working on that, they can afford it because our mill levy is so high. And my house that I bought, this went in the past 5 years, it went more than 5%, which is insane. I don't think it's right. I think we should do something. But again, I am very against sales tax. So if it needs be, I'll stick with the mill levy.
Okay. Mrs. DeRusso?
I agree, it is high, but we have to understand that we have expectations in Douglas County. We expect certain services. We expect, things to be taken care of. We expect not to have to worry about things. And unfortunately, all of that costs money. I think our county does a very good job of being responsible with our tax dollars. My goal as a county commissioner would be to make sure that that continues. But, you have to remember that the expectations and wants and needs that you have do cost money. So,
Mr. Denny?
Whether a mill levy is too high or too low is a very subjective decision, and that's the kind of decision we pay commissioners to make. But it's still a subjective one. I think what you get for the mill levy is a part of answering that question. What kind of services does the government provide, that particular level of government provide? What do the citizens get in return? And that is determined by the citizens themselves. Are they happy with the balance? I think having an informed citizenry of, well, if we have this level of mill levy, here are the services that won't exist. If we have this level of mill levy, here's the services that we might be able to do or would be able to do. Personally, I've always thought taxes are too high, But then I go elsewhere and see the taxes that are paid in other parts of this country and in other countries, and sometimes I think we don't have it too bad for what we get. I think right now, the mill levy in Douglas County, most people are reasonably happy with. I would be happy to hear from any of you if that's not true. I mean, everybody would like it to be low, but what would you be willing to give up? Answer.
Mr. Weaver?
I agree. I think it's about choices. And the choices we make in levying taxes dictate what services we're able to provide. So we've got to be able to balance that tax versus service issue. And one thing that can be done, I think, is to help increase the value of current properties. So the mill levy can stay the same, but we have a higher assessed value. Sometimes that can work out to an advantage to reducing the mill levy, so we don't have to do quite so much. But my first thought is about those choices we have to make. If we have so much money to work with, we have to find what are the core services of the county and keep those up. And if we have enough money to do some other things that people are really after and that are really hot button issues that we can address, then we should do that. So I think we're kind of in the ballpark for communities our size, but I think most of us probably feel it's too high.
And most of you did say that it was too high, and you talked about services. So what current services are you willing to cut to avoid a mill levy increase? You each have 90 seconds. Mrs. DeRusso, we'll start with you.
Well, I did say it is too high, but I also said that, you know, we have needs and issues and wants and desires that we do have to pay for. So I haven't seen anything in the budget that I would be willing to cut. You know, we're not going to cut any of the core services. So, you know, like I said, I think we're pretty responsible with our funding. And, you know, granted, I think it's high, but, you know, I'm getting what I feel that I'm getting what I'm paying for. So I can't complain about it.
Mr. Denny?
I guess we have to talk a minute about what's a core service. And so many times I see, and I've seen over the years, that a mill levy is justified, a mill levy increase is justified by saying we have to cut firemen, we have to cut policemen, we have to cut teachers, we have to cut what really are core services. I don't know at this point what I would cut because I'm not a commissioner. And while I'm aware of the budget, I'm not involved in the budget process this year. I don't know what the numbers are. It would be, I think, well, irresponsible to say I would cut this or that because I don't have anything that I say, oh, we're really wasting money on this. But the issue becomes, once again, comes around to I would rely on the citizens to tell me what they believe. I mean, it's a representative government. Tell me what you think.
Mr. Weaver?
Each of the county departments have strategic plans on what their goals are and what their objectives are and how they're going to meet them and are they meeting them or not and to what degree are they meeting them. So I think that's what the county commission needs to do and the county administrator as well as we're going through the budget process. And we're looking for excellence, not just existence. Just because a program's been around for 100 years, I don't believe in sacred cows. I think we need to look very critically at all of the things that we're putting money into, reward those that are providing excellent service and not just looking to keep their name on the books. And I can't come up with one right off the top of my head that I would say, yeah, this program here should be scuttled. But I think in that budget process, as department administrators come in and visit with the commissioners and with the county administrator, that's the job at that time, to take a look at those issues, take a look at those programs, and even different elements of each individual program that may be able to be pared down a little bit or combined with another department or agency that was similar. I think there are some efficiencies to be had that way. But I think it's in that budget process when you really get to drill down into that budget to see what kind of services are being provided and that service is at an appropriate level.
Mr. Shaheen?
We live in a very, very beautiful city. And it does, like Mr. Russo said, you have to pay to have something that beautiful. And especially going to Dubai and Russia, like I said earlier, or Japan, we have a perfect system over here, and it's so beautiful. And yeah, I don't think I would cut, unless it's common sense that we need to cut something. But we have the best police station, we have the best fire station, we have the best education. It'll be very hard to cut something from because of our mill levy again. Like she said, I would pay extra for a beautiful city like Lawrence.
All right. Well, thanks for joining the Voter Education Coalition and WOW 6 for our primary forum. The primary election is set for August 2nd. The general election will be held November 8th. A special thanks to all of our candidates for joining us. Have a great night.